Okay, let's take a look and see how we balance these equations when we have positron emission. Now, positron particle looks just like the beta decay particle, but instead of a -1, I have a +1. That is why I say it's very important to make sure that you know the notation of each particle, because otherwise you will get confused. Positron, positive, has a +1. Beta particle is a negative. Okay, the same principle works here too. Whatever is on the left-hand side has to equal what's on the right-hand side, which means that, let's do it mathematically, my 9 here has to equal +1 plus x, which means that x has to equal 9 minus 1, which gives me 8. Therefore, the Z number for this element is 8, and that means it's oxygen. Now, if you look at the mass number, it's for this particle is also 0, which means that the mass number between these two is not going to change. It's still going to be 18. Therefore, this is what fluorine 18 decays to by positron emission. Okay, now let's take a look at the next. Here I have to figure out what my particle is going to be. 12 has to equal 11 plus x, which means that x has to be 12 minus 11, which is +1. Therefore, it's going to be +1, and it's going to be my positron particle. My beta particle is a -1, and alpha particle has a 2 here. Therefore, it can only be my positron emission. Note that these two don't change, therefore the mass number has to be 0. Okay. Positron emission converts a proton into a neutron, and therefore my number of proton decreases by 1. And I get a smaller Z number. Electron, or the beta decay is the opposite. It actually it removes an electron from one of the neutrons and converts that to a proton. Therefore, it increases the Z number. So that's the difference between those two particles. Okay, now let's look at how we figure out the original element by what I'm given is the end product. Okay, the sum of my Z numbers here has to be the same as the one original element. Therefore, 24 plus a 1 is 25. So that's going to be 25. It's my Z number, which is element manganese, Mn. The sum of the mass numbers is still 50 because that's a 0. Therefore, that doesn't change. This is my original element, manganese 50 with a Z number of 25. Let's look at this example here. I have 35. I'm starting with bromine, and I want to figure out what it decays to. Now, once again, beta particle decreases the Z number by 1. So 35 is equal to +1 plus x, which means x is 35 minus a 1, because I take the 1 and I bring it across the equal sign here, which means 34. Element number 34 is selenium. And then if I look at the mass number, it has to be 75, because this is a 0 to equal the 75 up here. Okay, then let's look at the very last one, where I have to figure out, like this one, I have to figure out the original element. I add these two together. 14 plus 1 gives me 15, which is phosphorus. Element 15 is phosphorus. And then 30 plus a 0 gives me 30 as well, and that is the mass number. This is how you work these kinds of problems. Once again, remember, memorize that alpha has 4 up on top and 2 at the bottom. I cannot tell you how many students will mess this up. They'll flip these numbers. So memorize what that is. Memorize beta decay is -1 and a 0. And then positron emission is +1 and a 0. Memorize these 3 and you will not have any problems on balancing nuclear reactions.